Welcome to a special edition of the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mackowski, and joining me from Savas Beatie World Headquarters is my good friend and publisher, Ted Savas. How are you today, pal?
I'm good, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, glad to have you. And honestly, we're getting ready for summer reading season, so folks are kind of picking up books and heading out in the battlefield and wanting things to read. And I've been super impressed by your spring catalog. So I actually asked Ted if we could get together and talk about his spring books. This is not a paid endorsement. I've just been impressed by your lineup of spring releases and wanted to talk about them because I'm legitimately, as a reader, excited about the stuff you've been putting out this spring.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, us too. Yeah,
Yeah, I
as
was
well.
gonna say, like, so how you feeling about things? I mean, it's a pretty ambitious string of titles.
Yeah, it's an ambitious year. Our spring and fall line are full with some complex projects, including some classic reprint sort of projects on Antietam and Chancellorsville. So it's a full project year, and it's going well. I mean, it's busy. Veronica, she snaps everybody into place for with production, and she's right on schedule. So it's going well. Thanks for commenting on that.
Yeah, and Ted's referring to Veronica Kane, the recipient of last year's Emerging Civil War Upton Award or Stevenson Award, I think it was.
Yeah,
She's the production manager at Savas Beatie, and she is. I feel bad for her because it's like herding cats. Like she has so many of us to keep on task. The poor woman.
it's tough. It's tough. Yeah, yeah. She does a good job. People are afraid of her, which is interesting because she's
What?
she's a sweet lady.
She's wonderful. She's wonderful. Um, So, as you're kind of just as a reader, before we talk about this from your perspective as a publisher, as a reader, and you're looking at these books that have come out this spring, how do you feel about just kind of having a really good bunch of stuff to look at?
uh, as a reader, meaning as like a not a publisher.
Yeah, like I mean, because I mean, I don't know how much reading for fun you get to do anymore, but and I don't get to do much either. I guess, which is why I'm so excited about the lineup because like there's stuff that's just been enjoyable to read.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the problems of which I didn't know in advance is, I mean, I've been an avid reader since I was a little kid, right? Probably like you, probably like most of the people who are going to hear this. And I used to read a book every 3 days, and I always had books going and all that, and loved libraries. And then when you start publishing, you want to be a publisher, and you start getting into that, it becomes your daily grind. And so your love of reading is still there, but you're so exhausted because you're working in the sausage world of making books that you just don't want to pick up somebody else's book and look at it sometimes. And one of the other interesting issues is you can't look at it as a normal reader. I'll open a book and I'll think, well, the font's not the right font, the margins aren't right, the letting's not right, the binding's not great. Oh, the dust jacket isn't designed properly. You can't just enjoy it. And so that's sort of one of the downsides. But I do get to read the manuscripts, and then I see them in later form. So of course I'm reading everything, and it's very enjoyable. And this year, I mean, we've done lots of books that I'm super proud of, but this year and last year, I think we put out some of the best books we've ever put out, and I'm very excited about those. And I'm excited for the authors because they've worked for years on these, and it's neat to see.
Last year, you and I did a little video tour of your library, and you've got a whole set of shelves that are just books that you have published, and a pretty amazing legacy, a great collection of stuff. And
There, there, and over there, and over there, and yeah.
so it is neat that you're kind of creating these things that other people get to enjoy so much, even if you don't get to kind of enjoy them as a reader yourself as much anymore. But
I get enjoyment knowing that other people are reading them and learning and enjoying, and I get a lot of, posts on social media, but I get a lot of emails from people, Facebook messengers, Instagram messages, and they're saying, "Hey, I'm halfway through this book, and it's one of the best books I've ever." And that gives me a lot of pleasure because that's one of the big reasons why I'm a publisher.
it's super gratifying to get those sorts of messages from folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as a publisher, then, give us the quick rundown of what you have done so far this year. And I know you've got a ambitious fall, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But to give us the quick rundown of what you've done so far.
Well, I have to look at the list
Okay.
because Yeah. What people don't, a lot of people don't realize is I have maybe, and I'm just guessing, let's say 50 books in the queue behind us that we're developing in different ways. And then I've got 15 that are super active in production and, moving forward. And then we've got the books that we just put out. So sometimes you forget which books, which seasons, what titles. Oh yeah, we're doing that one. You just normally forget. So I've got a list up here. I printed a list. Like I
Well, I
better
have to do
have.
the same thing when I go through the ECW books. It's like, yeah, when did that come out? And, I've got to.
Yeah. Well, one of the books we did this year, of course, is yours on John Adams, and which is for the EC Emerging Revolutionary War series, which is really a fascinating book. I'm going to admit that I haven't read all of it yet, but I've read probably two-thirds of it. Adams is a fascinating guy. You did a good job. I think you captured him really well.
Thanks.
I know that you developed a deep interest in him, and probably even deeper now that you've written him, and you get sort of get into the guy, and like I did with Rains, and it's you kind of live with him, and
Yeah,
it's a neat thing. So good job on that.
thanks.
With ECW Emerging Civil War books, I think we're doing the Petersburg uh, two volume by Sean Chick this
Yep.
year.
Yep.
Why don't you just briefly tell us what that covers?
Yeah. So, from Hatcher's Run Through the Crater.
Yeah, that's right. Through the
Yeah.
crater.
So the first book was just like the initial assaults. And one of the things I kind of like about this approach, and Will Green in his big volume, kind of takes a similar sort of thing where it's not just like 9 months and we're just kind of here staring at each other. Like it's a series of active operations. And Sean has done a really good job of kind of bringing out the fact that it's not a static siege, but a series of movements, maneuvers, and these guys are really actively poking and prodding and attacking each other, not just giving each other the stare down.
Remember when we were kids and it was just a 9 month siege and nothing happened?
Yeah, yeah,
And then you get older and you start reading about things. You think, wait a minute, that's a big battle. That was in the Petersburg campaign.
yeah.
What's the Weldon? Then you start studying it and you realize it wasn't very static at all.
Right,
There's a
right.
lot of things going on. All the Grant's different offensives. It was
It's pretty
pretty
dynamic,
active.
and Sean's done a good job. And he's kind of brought in a lot of guys who are working on preservation projects down there, and people who like a lot of local expertise to help him kind of flesh out those little nooks and crannies to really make sure that he's getting the story right. So I think it's
Right.
pretty
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. Yeah. Hey, and I know we're going to end up leaving a book out and the author's going to get really mad at us. Um, there was another ECW book by, was it Neil? I think Neil Chatelain's book
Yep.
on, it's not Iron to Float. Yeah, Iron to Float.
This great contest afloat.
Great contest to float.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
Uh,
is the Navy element, which is so overlooked. I'm a big Navy, Confederate Union Navy guy. I just love the Navy stuff. I mean, I love all of it, and he did a great job. And he's such a naval guy,
yeah.
and he's got such a good eye and sense of this. Of course, he did a terrific book for us, defending the arteries of the rebellion, which is the
Yeah.
Western Theater naval stuff on Brownwater Navy stuff. Really interesting. Did a great job. Neil's great to work with, and just a super researcher and writer. So it's
Yeah,
nice to
really,
see.
really like his stuff. And of course, he's got a book coming out in the fall as part of your lineup too. We'll talk about that in a second. But I don't think I
Mm.
realized quite when I was asking. I mean, I sort of did when I was like, "Can you just do a book that's an overview of the Navy?" And that is way more than a person should have to try to squeeze into 45,000 words.
And he did it.
And he did it. Yeah.
And he did it, and he did a good job. And yeah, it was quite an undertaking, and he did a fine job on it. So that's yeah. So there's just three, emerging Rev War and emerging Civil War titles, and we've got a couple more coming in the fall, and
And
there's a
then
lot going
uh,
on.
Desert Empire. I don't want to forget that one too. For
That okay,
our
that's
sister
one of
in
my
New
favorites.
Mexico. Yeah.
The New Mexico thing and all that, it's so crazy. It's insanity, and of course you got pretty much a drunk Confederate commander and all kinds of stuff going on. But that was Patrick Kelly Fisher and Phil Greenwald,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they did a magnificent job. I'm getting a lot of feedback really positively on Desert Empire,
Oh, good.
and so if you want to read something different about the war that you don't usually see, and you want to read about the New Mexico campaign, that's a terrific way to jump in and get a good taste for it.
Pretty colorful cast of characters, crazy landscape, no water, which you kind of don't think about those sorts of things.
What are they doing
I
out there?
know, and it's like, all right, well, let's just see what happens. Let's give him a drink and see what happens. It's
And it's a neat book, and I'm really, really, really happy that we got that done. Yeah,
yeah. Well, thanks for your support on that. So lots going on the ECW front, but you've got a lot of other good books as well that
I
came out
do.
this fall or this
So
spring.
let me talk about a few here. So this one came out recently. It's called Stonewall Jackson's Winter Operations: The Raids Against the C&O Canal and the Bath Romney Campaign, or early in the war, late 61 to 62 by Timothy Snyder. This is sort of his forte. He's got another earlier book on sort of that part of the war. Um, but it's it's not a pro Jackson book in the sense
Oh,
that Jackson was the developed commander that he would become, but rather studies it, takes the sources, looks at the terrain, and says these are the choices that they made. And Jackson doesn't, come out of it particularly well. But again, it's very early in the war, and these guys aren't used to commanding much of anything. And so, he didn't do great. Grant didn't do great early on. Lee had problems early on. McClellan, it's normal. And so he sort of studies that and the strategic ramifications. And it's a great book. It's really well written and researched. The reviews are strong, and so if you want to read early Jackson, early war stuff, you can't go wrong. It's a super book.
yeah. And as you know, I'm a Jackson guy, and
You are?
yeah, I know, surprise, right? And there
What's your
is that.
son's name?
Yes, my oldest son is Jackson.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, yeah. There is that tendency to mythologize him, and what I really liked about Tim's book is like here are all of the things that will make him great later, and here are all the problems that will make him weak later. And Tim, I think, is very unsparing, but not overly harsh in laying all that out. And Jackson's secretiveness is one of his greatest fatal flaws, and Tim is right up on Front Street about discussing that and is critical of Jackson for that. And
Yeah, I mean
Jackson
his
never lays that
secretiveness
lesson.
was really beneficial sometimes
Yeah,
and really detrimental sometimes.
yeah.
And it's just his way, the way he's wired, the way he wanted to operate, and we all have positives and negatives about what we do and don't do.
So I did an interview with Tim a couple weeks ago for the podcast, and
Yeah.
I mean I was just amazed by his command of the subject matter. I mean he was just adroit with the facts, and you could tell he'd been living with that story for a long time and just really knew it. As a publisher, if someone says like, "Hey, let's do a campaign book about an attack on a railroad," like it doesn't necessarily sound like it's going to have sex appeal. So what is it that drew you to that book in the first place?
Well, as people know, and I know that you already know, um, I tend to do things that are a little out of the mainstream
Mhm.
because they need to be done. And of course, this one has Jackson in the title, so I mean,
That
it can't
helps.
hurt, right? But this kind of stuff needs to be done. And so when I look at when I remember when it came in and I looked at the submission and I thought, okay, maybe, and I looked at his bibliography, which is really strong.
Yeah.
And I read about him and I thought, okay, he's got the chops for it. He's got experience in this area. His research is really strong. So I said, well, let me take a look at the manuscript. And then he sent the manuscript in and I started flipping through it. And it's obvious this is a really solid piece of work and it deserves to be published. And that's why I took it on.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's a great piece of scholarship. Really liked it too. And then Tim, my first time really meeting him. What a pleasant guy to talk to too.
He's a nice guy. You did a great interview. It was a really good interview. I really encourage people to jump on to the Emerging Civil War site, find that interview and that podcast and watch it. It's very informative. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great stuff. Another book that you had come out this spring that I was super impressed with was Chris Hartley's biography on D.H. Hill. And Hill's just a fascinating character. I love him as a character, and I felt like he's needed a good biography. And then Chris,
Yeah,
just he really delivered on that one.
he did. And my camera, for some reason, is automatically zooming all over the place. So I'm there. I'm not touching anything, folks. People are like, what is Savas doing? He's not doing
It's the
anything.
spirit of
Uh,
G.H. Hill just sort of
it,
directing things.
he's all over the place. Pretty soon I'm going to start yelling at you guys. You guys can call me a croaker and throw me out of the army. Um, yeah, Chris, I've known Chris for forever and decades, and he's a great historian. I've never had an opportunity to publish him. Um, I think we did maybe an article in Civil War Regiments years ago, but Chris is a real historian, deep researcher. He pitched this to me some time ago. Came up, I think, or came down from North Carolina and took me to dinner, and we talked about it. And I bought in. We all know about who Hill is and what he's been accused of, and what's some of his positives, some of his negatives. But a lot of the stuff is not quite right, and like so much of history. And so Chris went through, dug through the sources, and says, well, people say that Lee didn't want him in the army anymore, and actually Lee was trying to keep him in the army with Northern Virginia, and the reasons why he left, and his relationships with people. And so it's a really fresh, original, warts and all book. It's not it's not somebody who's trying to, he has an axe to grind to build him up. He's like, who was Hill? And what did he do? And so Chris came in, the book was bigger than it was. It was too long by a lot. And so I told him, well, the people that are going to read this really are going to read it because he was in the Civil War. Tell authors this a lot. And so having a book that's 50% pre-war or 50% post-war, uh, it's too much. And so we need to sort of whittle that down a little bit. And so Chris did a great job doing that. And I also tell authors today, because they don't often realize it, unlike the past, when you cut something out of a book, it's pretty much gone forever. And today, when you cut stuff out, there's something called social media. And so you can post a letter that you cut out, you can post a section that you cut out, you can talk about that. And so nothing's really lost. And so you can keep using that research in different ways. So Chris did a great job consolidating and condensing. It's still a big book, but he did a great job. And of course, Hill was involved in the Army of Northern Virginia, and then he was in the West and in the Army of Tennessee with the Chickamauga campaign, and that was a whole crap show. And I'll use a different word for what I usually use. Then of course he's in North Carolina, and he was all over. He was down in Augusta. My man Raines had to deal with him for a while, and when he left and went to North Carolina, Hosea Gorgas, the chief of ordnance in Richmond, writes to Raines and said, "Oh, I see that Hill is in North Carolina. How did you get rid of him?" And so, he carried with him a certain aura about him that people didn't like a lot. But anyway, it's a great biography. It's a military biography, and if people want to know more about Hill and his relationships and the armies he was in, that's a good book.
It seems to me that like the era of the 900 page Bud Robertson Stonewall Jackson biography, like the era of that is kind of behind us. I think from attention span points of view, yeah, you're a publisher. I don't know if maybe you've got different perspectives on that, but like it's hard to get
Yeah.
through one of those. It's hard to find one of those.
Well, the sad thing is my Rains book, which is going to come out this fall, is probably going to be 748 pages
Okay.
total, right? Including the bibliography and everything else. It's way too long, but I only put in, I got boxes of stuff I didn't even put in, right? And I have to follow my own. Um, but yeah, it's harder. One of the reasons as a publisher we want shorter books is because it's harder to judge a print run today. Because I mean, the older print runs, which were much bigger, those don't exist anymore. So the print runs are smaller. But the problem is when you run through a print run, you have to use a crystal ball and burn some incense and say some magic words to try to figure out, do we print 500 copies or 4,000 copies? It's, you don't know. You do the best guess you can. And then if you sell out fairly quickly, which you do sometimes, and well, why is that book selling so quickly? I don't know. And then you got to go back to press. But if it's a big book, it's very expensive, and you're sinking a lot of money into it, and then you only sell a third of those, and you got books sitting on the shelf. You're like, well, why aren't those selling? And so the smaller the book, the easier it is to reprint. So you want books that are 250 to 350 kinds of pages lengthwise because it's easier to reprint those. So when you start getting to 400 and 500 pages, it's a lot more expensive. So it's harder. Yeah.
And of course, you'll still see the occasional like Ron Chernow Twain book, which I recently finally picked up. I mean, that thing's massive, but Ron Chernow's got a name that will sell books, right? And so,
Like Atkinson
yeah,
with his World War II and his Rev War stuff. They're big books. I read them. I read them cover to cover. It takes me a while.
uh,
But yeah, I mean they're good books. And so I'm hoping when we do some of these bigger books, I'm hoping that there's enough interest in that people will slowly devour them and enjoy them.
yeah. Now, when you worked with Chris to kind of bring his book down to size a little bit, and you said like people want to read his military history, that's kind of what they're interested in. And tell me about that idea of kind of knowing your lane and staying in it, because I think that's one of your expertise is obviously is kind of knowing who's reading your books and what they're looking for.
Um, I'm not sure I understood your question exactly, but are you asking me why I had him? What lane did I put him in and
No, I
why?
think just kind of that notion you maybe from a publisher's point of view of just kind of knowing your audience and knowing what they're looking for and
Oh,
knowing
yeah,
how to kind of give them what they want and need and making sure they're also kind of getting the newer stuff too. But
got it. Yeah. Yeah. And so because we're primarily a Civil War publisher, primarily the people who come looking for us and our titles are interested in that aspect of their life, right? Of if it's a biography, if it's a military campaign, whatever it is. And so you have to attract the audience to your book. And so if the subject it wasn't in the Civil War, you wouldn't be writing a book on it. So the core issue is why are you writing a book on it? Well, if D.H. Hill did his pre-war stuff and went into the ministry or did whatever he was teaching and that was his life and there was no Civil War, nobody would probably be writing a book on him. And so why are we writing a book on him? Why do people want to read about him? Well, he fought in the Army of Northern Virginia. He fought in some really important battles. He hobnobbed with a lot of high-ranking commanders. He did some amazing things. That's what people want to read on him. And so the newer research, as you know, Chris, so much of when you start researching a project, I'm going to just take a tangent here. When you start researching a project, it's incredible how much material you find that contradicts what's been published.
yeah,
And it's firsthand, reliable source material. And you think, well, here's a guy who was there who says something that contradicts what an author wrote 40 years ago on its face. But that letter never came up. Why didn't that get put into And so history continues to evolve. And D.H. Hill, the biography that Chris wrote, is a perfect example of all this fresh research that paints a different picture of this guy and his relationships with Lee, with Davis, with Bragg, with Longstreet. How does that fit with Jackson? Jackson's brother-in-law. So how did all that fit in, and how does it compare to the old historiography? That's the kind of stuff I like to publish, and those are the kind of authors I like to find. And that's where you want to target that manuscript there. And that's what we try to do.
yeah. I
I
know
hope
that.
I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Yeah.
perfect. And I know Chris said he benefited from time because he'd started this project decades ago, and then 9/11 happened, and his professional career intervened because of that. So then he came back to this work afterwards. And in the meantime, a whole bunch of new stuff had been discovered and been digitized and easier to access. And so he said, having that time to access those new sources that had been being
Mhm.
discovered really made a huge difference on his manuscript.
I have said for years, I wrote a blog post on it, I don't know, 10 years ago. And then I republished it a few years ago. I should republish it again, called that the golden age of Civil War publishing is now.
Yeah.
And I had several people challenge me on it, which is great. I love that. And I said, okay, go pick your favorite book from 50 years ago. Open the bibliography. Look at the footnotes. Now find a book on the same subject that's been published in the last decade by a credible author and a credible publisher. Look at the footnotes. Look at the bibliography. and tell me which book you would rely on if you had to make bets. Just what's accurate, what's not accurate. And the research today that people are able to do is magnificent if they'll put the work in. You still it's there's a lot of work to really write a good book. Um, my own Rains book, and I mentioned Rains 3 times, and I was swearing to myself before I got on, I'm not going to mention my own book. Um, my book would be utterly different if I hadn't been able to search digitally through the ORs and the newspapers and some other sources, right? If there was no fold 3, I couldn't get into the compiled service records, couldn't get into all the letter books, which are really hard to find in the old school way of researching. But when you can find this stuff, you realize that old historians, prior historians who used some newspapers, they're looking on microfilm. And I used to do that in the 90s, early 90s. I'd order microfilm reels and I'd sit there, and you can only do that for 10 minutes before your eyes go, and you go nuts. But you have to guess, and oh, there's something I might need.
Yeah.
But you can't find 10% of what you want on microfilm. And so today you see 50 newspapers cited because there's magnificent stuff. In the old days, you'd find 6. Uh, and so the research today is much better. The new sources are coming out, stuff's being digitized, but the authors still have to do the work. And a lot of people don't realize how to research or how to do the work. And well, I'll take another quick tangent. I've had several authors recently who turned in decent manuscripts, right? But they're first draft manuscripts in the sense that I'll go to the bibliography and I'll see a lot of good stuff, but I won't see any compiled service records. I know that these guys had exchanges that are in letter books. I don't see the letter books. I know these guys have a lot of coverage in newspapers, and I'll see 2. There probably should be 40. And you've got original articles published from the front that appear in newspapers, that are contemporary. And I'll say, have you been on fold 3? No, no. Well, let me show you my bibliography and you can compare it because I want you to see what's available for you. And then they routinely come back and say, whoa, I have a lot of work to do. Yeah, you do. And they're excited about it because then they send me stuff that, oh, look, I'm finding this. I'm finding this. Oh my gosh, I'm finding this. And so that's what we have to do. So part of my job as a publisher is publish good books. Part of my job is to help authors learn how to be better historians and better researchers, better writers, for posterity's sake, which you and I talk about a
Yeah.
lot. That it's going to all be here after we're gone, and we want to contribute something positive, and that's what we do.
Yeah. And of course, the flip side of that is, you spend 15 years collecting stuff and you finally get your book written. And as soon as it appears in print, like 10 other things show up and you're like, oh my gosh, where was this, 6 months ago? like,
We had that happen with our Bentonville book when Mark Bradley did his Bentonville book. There was no book on Bentonville, and then ours came out. I think ours came out 1 month before Nathaniel Cheers's, or one
oh,
month after. It was like right there, right? And I remember having to talk the author off a ledge a little bit because I said, "No, this is going to help us because it's all of a sudden there's all this interest where there wasn't a lot of interest, and now it's going to get people's attention." And so I don't have any problem with that. I see that with Gettysburg, and I get authors who say, "Oh my God, you're publishing a book, so and so, but you've accepted my book on that." And I said, "Well, no, your book's a little bit different, and your book will be out a year and a half later. It's fine. There's plenty of room for this stuff. The research is different and all that." So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, kind of going back to Chris's book about D.H. Hill, and of course, Hill leads a fascinating post-war life and has a huge impact on post-war memory and the
he does.
development of the lost cause.
Yeah.
And that's which could be a book on its own, but maybe a little different of a lane than most of the stuff that you would publish. Um,
Yeah, yes. The answer is yes. I mean, he did, some religious stuff. He did the Lost Cause stuff. He had Civil War memory, Confederate memory, graves and recollections and remembrances, and that's all. Was important for what he did, but it's not something we can sell well if that's the only thing it is. Just because we couldn't print enough and sell enough books that would matter for us as a trade publisher.
Mhm.
But I think there are articles there, and in fact, I've encouraged Chris to think about taking some of that material and repackaging it in original articles and publishing them in some local periodicals or local county historical newsletters or whatever, because I think it's important and I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that sort of touches on another kind of elephant in the room, just like the cost of printing a book, like paper costs and all that. And every time I talk to you, you're like, paper went up again, paper went up again.
It
And I
just
see
did
you sort of
again.
like,
Yeah.
smoking a cigarette and like, oh my God, and you don't smoke, but it's like, oh, this is terrible. Because like paper just never gets cheaper, but like it's an expensive prospect to publish a physical book these days.
People don't realize, I've talked about this a little bit, but most customers don't, I mean, they don't think about that because it's not their, what they do. But from 2020 to today, the cost to produce one book has gone up 100%, not 20%, not inflation rates. You have to plug everything in because it's paper, binding, labor, packing, shipping, warehousing, all of that. And when you I added up all those costs, and I'll just make up numbers. Let's say it used to cost us $3 to produce a book. And we'd sell it for 30. Well, we're not making $27 because you put the distributor in and he takes this cut and then you put Amazon in and they take so publishers and authors make very little. And so, but that $3 book is now 6. And so that $3 was our core profit that we would use to keep the lights on, pay the employees, pay taxes, pay rent, pay everything else, pay Kenya's booze and cigarettes. And so that profit part is gone. And so we have to make up, doing it other ways. And so we have to sell, smarter. We have to use different lanes to sell. And so what a lot of people don't realize, this is true not just for us, but for all smaller publishers, is when you buy through Amazon, we make pennies. I mean, we cover our costs and then we make a little bit more, but almost nothing. And if all of our books were sold through Amazon, we'd be out of business. I mean, and again, people don't realize that, right? And so we have to do more to sell directly to customers because that gives the author a royalty and gives us enough to go ahead and print the next book you want to read next year. And you and I have had this conversation, Chris. I'd love to retire someday.
Yeah.
Uh, I really worry about if SB was gone, who's going to do what we're doing?
Yeah.
Uh, Simon and Schuster's not going to do it. Uh, I'm not going to name other names in this field, but they're not going to do it, or they're not going to do it, I think, as well. So who's going to jump in and do it? So it sort of keeps me here plugging away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's looking at the wider field right now, it really does seem like like who's publishing what has changed pretty significantly over the last 10 years. And the sorts of books that academic presses are doing are much different than they used to be. And in some ways, you kind of have a lane to yourself in a way that you didn't once upon a time. But the competition's also a little different. Tell me about that overall landscape and, you know.
Yeah, the landscape, you can take a lot of university presses, did tremendous Civil War material. Tennessee, Louisiana, UNC Press, these guys, they did a lot. And then in the early 2020s, when you had the whole Confederate statute debate and everything else, they just pulled back from it. For some reason, they thought, well, we just can't touch this stuff anymore. Part of it's academia, part of it's the circles of people there that didn't want to do it, which is, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, that's okay. That's fine. And I noticed this was happening when I had authors coming to me saying my book got canceled, or I've had a contract for a year with this press, and they just told me they can't publish my book now. What do I do? And so I go, well, what book is it? And it happened to be a battle book on whatever, Gettysburg. And I'm like, I'll take that. And so we sort of moved very aggressively in 2019, 2020, 2021. We moved very aggressively into that space and just took the flag and ran up the hill and took it. And we don't intend to release it. And I've noticed, the last year maybe some of that university press stuff is coming back. They're starting to go, well, wait a minute, I think we went too far. And these are some of our core books, and people do want to read this. And so some of them are going back to taking a battle book or a Confederate book or whatever, but not nearly as aggressively.
Mhm.
So that's sort of impacted who publishes what, which is fine with me. I talk to a lot of these folks. Of course, the late Pete Carmichael, he and I used to talk about these things. And uh, they didn't give me permission to say their names, so I won't. A couple with some university presses, and we converse and share some manuscripts. I'll say this is something maybe better for you, or they'll say, hey Ted, this is something we've got we can't publish. You might want this. And they were universally lamenting the fact that they had to give up that high ground.
Yeah.
It was their board of directors or whoever were their advisors and their funding and whatever. They didn't want to leave the hill, but they were forced to leave the hill. And so now I think that they're trying to climb back up part way. Maybe if it's Everest, they're going to go to base camp one. Uh, but we're up on the summit. We've got plenty of oxygen, and we're not leaving. So, yeah. How's that for an analogy on the top
Yeah,
of my
that's
head?
right. Does that make me the Sherpa? Is
Well, could be. Yeah, Sherpas, it's dangerous living, man. You need to
no
make a
kidding.
better living.
Wow. So going back to the list of spring titles, big one that you have that's maybe just shipping from the printer now to the warehouse is Frank O'Reilly's Malvern Hill book. Um,
Well, it's funny you should say that. I have an advanced copy.
Very good.
Yeah, Retreat from Victory, the Battle of Malvern Hill, and the End of the 7 Days. And it's as magnificent as you'd think it is,
Mhm.
right? And so, Frank, he worked on this forever. And I don't know if you know this. I don't think he'll get mad if I say it. Um, he did the first draft manuscript years ago, and he lost it. It like erased from his drive completely. And he had to rebuild his entire manuscript. And he said, well, it was better because of it, because a lot of time went by and new research opportunities, like we talked earlier. And yeah, he had to put it all together. And so, like that Buffalo Bills uh,
Go
mug there.
Bills.
Yeah, I can't believe you haven't sent me one. Um, I'm a Vikings fan. Everybody knows that, but I'm a big Bills fan. And Chris and
Oh,
I talk. Yeah,
this was
Chris and I
actually
talk Bills football.
this was a gift from my brother-in-law who's a Patriots fan, actually. So
Nice,
yeah, yeah, very nice.
nice. Yeah, it's nice looking. I like the Bills a lot. Always have.
Well,
So
next time I'm up there, I'll get you some goodies.
that would be nice. So Frank, I drove into North Carolina to meet Frank a year and a half ago or whatever it was, because I've been bugging him to send it to us. And everybody heard about this manuscript and is it going to really come out and blah blah blah. And and I would ping him and he'd say, "Oh, I think I have to go back to my old press." And I said, "No, you don't." I said, "They have a right of first refusal, but no, you don't, because you can refuse it no matter what they offer." And so he said, "Well, I'm impressed with what you guys do. I follow it. I have a lot of your books, and maybe we should talk." So we met halfway between Virginia and here, and had a sort of a mafioso kind of talk. His bodyguards were behind him, and mine were behind me, and we patted each other down, sat down at the table, and came to an agreement. And I'm glad I did. I'm really excited about it. The book will be here. I want to say it hits our warehouse next week, maybe week after that. So we'll be releasing it in June, and we're trying to do a special signing book release up in the Richmond area. We're sort of scrambling to reschedule that and get that all done. So we're excited about that, and it's going to be one of the big books of the year, and it deserves to be. And he's reinterpreted a lot of things. He told me some of the things. I won't surprise everybody. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but he said, well, we thought a lot of it took place here, but I don't think so. I think some of this important stuff was here. And we think these troops were here, but actually they were on the other side of this brigade. And so he's reinterpreted quite a bit, but nobody's dug as deep as he has. Nobody's walked the ground like he has. And so his weight is worth gold today. And his research, as you can imagine, is stellar.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his writing's great. And so it's a tremendous battle study, and it's going to deserve the accolades it's going to receive, and I'm excited to publish it.
Yeah, I've known Frank a long time, and the story of this book has just been an ongoing, like, oh, how's the book coming? And it's taken a long time for it to become realized. And everybody I know who knows Frank is looking forward to this book because
Yeah.
it's been such a fixture for such a long time.
Sort of like Bobby Crick's Gaines Mill books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And,
Yeah.
and and
And
and Frank and Bobby spent a lot of time walking the field together, kind of talking over their respective books.
everything. Yeah. Yeah. They're both sounding boards, each for one another, which is really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what else did you have in your spring lineup? I know that there's.
Well, I just got in from Steve Eden, Crisis at Antietam, Cornfield in the West Woods. And Steve is I have to look at, I have so many authors I forget, but I'm going to do this, wing it. So he taught at West Point or teaches at West Point, a retired combat guy, leads staff rides at Antietam. And what he does that's different, and I asked him this specifically. I said, you look at Hartwig's magnificent study. How's this different? You look at oh my gosh, I can't think of the fellow's name, and he's a great guy, and I talk to him routinely. He wrote the book on the cornfield, and Chantilly, and I can't think of his name, and I'm very sorry. But how does it differ from that? And so we went through it together, and we looked at the bibliography and talked about it, and it's much more of it does all the strategic stuff and all the macro stuff and puts the armies where they're supposed to be and why they're in the cornfield and Westwoods and all that. But then he goes down to the unit level because he was a unit commander. And he talks about why were they making these decisions at the brigade level, at the regimental level, at the company level? Why were they doing that? What was happening when people were being killed and they didn't have the command structure? Does that account for this or that? And so he puts you down at the grassroots sort of eyeball level and walks you through the Westwoods cornfield fighting from the Confederate and Union perspective at that level. And it's really unique and it's very eye-opening. And that's how it's so different from what Hartwig does and from what the other fellow does. I'm so sorry, I can't remember his name. It's age, I think.
Well, you'll remember as soon as we finish.
Yeah, right. As soon as I do, and so that's how this book is different. So it just came out, Crisis at Antietam. So it's a brand new book, and it's really really solid. And I'm a battle guy. I'm an Antietam guy. Antietam's my favorite field to visit, and so I'm excited to take this book now that I've read it and studied it. Now I want to go out there and walk around. I'd love to do it with Steve Eden. I just wrote to him and said, "Are you going to be at the Gettysburg, Savas Beatie September's Antietam meetup?" We do Gettysburg and Antietam because he would be the perfect guy to lead a tour out there.
Right, right.
So we're trying to see if we can get that arranged. Yeah.
That reminds me of the perspective that Joe Boslett took with his little Round Top book, where he had combat experience himself and then used that perspective to kind of look at what happened on the ground and digging into the research for himself. And it's a really I think fascinating and useful perspective to bring to a battle study.
And you interviewed you interviewed Joe on a podcast. I haven't listened to all of it. I listened to part of it, and I got distracted by something. Oh, look, a squirrel over there. And yeah, same kind of thing, right? I mean, Joe dug into the sources, looked at stuff, has some different interpretation of things on Little Round Top, but he's looking at it from a combat perspective because he's been in combat. And he said, when these guys, you read their reports, you look at their letters, and you read and think of what they're going through at the time, the average reader has no idea and can't conceptualize what it's really like. And so he tries to put himself into Vincent's shoes and into, Warren's shoes and into these guys who were, organizing this operation and then defending it. And it's a different perspective, and it gives you a different insight into that part of the battlefield, which is again what I really like. I like to have original research presented in a nice, fresh way for people to consume and think about.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to Steve's book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm looking forward to taking some time with it. So, what else was on the list? I want to make sure we have
I'm
any.
going to grab a copy. I don't think I have a copy here. Hold on a second.
Okay, this is where see we're going to zoom in. Thanks to your camera, we're zooming in on a fantastic picture
I think so.
of a soldier or a sailor who's looking through a periscope. There's a great story behind this picture that I'll have Ted share in a second. But for folks who are able to see, you might be able to see there are little scribbles on it, and those are actual signatures that are on this picture. As Ted,
Oh, yeah, my U-boat picture.
that's right, the U-boat picture.
Well, I can't believe that for some reason I don't have. Well, I don't know what I did with it. I've got it here somewhere, and I can't imagine this with all these books, and I can't find it. Yeah, it's Louis Picon's book, Ulysses' Odyssey,
Yes.
and it's U.S. Grant's world tour at the dawn of American empire. And Lewis is an award-winning presidential historian, and when he approached me with this, I thought it's a little outside our wheelhouse, but I'm interested. And then, of course, he's very active. He gives lots of talks. He's on social media. He's very polished, super nice guy, great researcher, great writer. And so I looked at that and I thought, yeah, I think this needs to be done and let's do it. And it came out really well. It's a great book. And so if you want to read about Grant, and his world tour was
Mm.
mind-boggling, right? I mean, it was a world tour. This guy's riding camels and he's you're meeting with the Japanese and he's in it's crazy what Grant did and all the people he met. And it projected American diplomatic power around the world in a different way that had never really been done before. And so the dawn of American empire. And it's a good book. And so if you like Grant, or if you like that part of American history, it's well researched, well told, and I highly recommend it. And it's also available in audio. A lot of our books are in audio, it's in audio too. And with you and your long drives up to New York to get to Bonaventure, you should be listening to that on audio.
Well, and that's the most understudied part of Grant's life was his world tour, and Alfred Young, the journalist, went on the tour with him. And actually, and Grant drops a lot of bon mots along the way as he's talking to Young. And then he'd be like, oh, and there was that time at Vicksburg, or oh, was that time. So there's a lot of great primary source stuff from Grant as he's recalling these battles as well. But the trip itself was hugely impactful. He's the most famous man in the world doing the world. And so,
Yeah.
Cohen's book is just a really much needed look at a very understudied but very impactful part of Grant's life.
I've got, and I just looked over there, they're wrapped up, so I won't go get them. You know the multi-volume set on Grant's trip around the world?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I want to say it's 3 volumes, but when I was back I think I was in law school, and there was it's called the Haunted Bookshop, and I would go in there, and they had just this big old Victorian house, 3 stories, books everywhere. The old days, man, it was so much fun, right? And they knew if it was Civil War related, call me. And this came in, and they called me, and I picked it up, but it's 5 volumes,
Uh,
and I never paid attention to it closely, and they're in good shape until a few years ago. And I started flipping through it, and I realized that they're like in between pages. Like, so you'd read it and it would just end. And then the next page would start in the next volume. And I thought, well, that's not right. So I started looking up sets, and I couldn't find the set with this many volumes anywhere, like nowhere. It doesn't exist. I thought, well, what the heck do I have? And so I started looking through it, and I contacted, I think it's in Mississippi, the
yeah.
Grant Library Memoir collection. And I was writing with somebody back then and sent some pictures, and they said, whoever I was writing to, I can't remember who it was, said this was probably one of those sets that agents for subscriptions
Ah.
bound and took around to gather pre-orders. And it's extremely rare. And I think she said, we've never seen one. And so I bought it for $30 way back when. And yeah, and so I don't know. I'm way off camera and I don't know what the heck's happening with my camera. Um, so yeah, so I've got that and that's kind of a neat thing. So when Piccone said, "Hey, I've got this book on that," I immediately thought of, "Oh, so do I," but it's completely different than what you're doing. So I've got both of them.
What else is on the list? I want to make sure we cover everybody before we wrap up. And I know we've got a
I
couple.
think that's it. I mean, I think we've got we've got yeah, the 14th Ohio memoir by edited by Joanna Hagapian and Dave Powell. And that's coming out I think next month. That's part of our we did a 55th Ohio sort of a firsthand letter collection. I think I need to put a title on that series because it's becoming a series. Um, but it's a memoir of a guy who fought in the West and he wrote this incredible memoir. It's mind-bogglingly good. And Shiloh, and there's stuff like Dave was reading it saying, I've never seen like a lot of this stuff. It's really good. I said, well, you want to help edit this? And he said, sure. So we're putting that one out, and that's on the 14th Ohio, and that's coming out next I think next month. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the spring season. Yeah, and
You want to tease the fall?
well, let me tease a couple papers collections because Chris
Yeah.
Bryan would I could hear him screaming when he's watching this like wait a minute you have to get the Chancellorsville papers
That's right.
so
And I'm literally sitting on the Chancellorsville battlefield. So
yeah
we
oh
need
all
to
right
bring
yeah
some
of course you
Chancellors
are
over
right
there.
so and again I don't know why my camera is way over there and if I turn it to look head on it puts me I
You're
don't know what I'm
frame. You're
doing
still in the frame. You're doing all right.
all
Yeah.
right so the Chancellorsville papers are a collection of all the research papers from Hooker Collection and Hamlin and different things from around the country. And they're, their reports, their letters, their telegrams, their messages, they're all kinds of stuff that the average person can never see. And most researchers never look at other than a piece here or a piece there. And so Chris Bryan collected all of these together and annotated them and put them all together into what with pre-war stuff. I mean, pre-battle campaign stuff leading up to it, battle stuff, post-war recollection stuff, and some newspaper stuff and some other things. So it'll end up being probably 4 volumes. The first two are coming out next month. And Bob Crick Sr., who doesn't really do, refuses to pretty much write or do anything these days. I really would wanted him to write a forward for it, and so he said, "Oh, blah blah blah." And so he said, well, "Let me see it," and so I sent him some of the material, and he was okay. This is really important, and Bob wrote a terrific forward, and so that's just exciting. And we were going to republish the Bigelow campaign, Chancellorsville campaign study originally, the way it's set up, because the original campaign study has all these fold out maps and
Maps.
they're in color. And some of the pages have color maps, but the book itself is black and white. But the problem is you got to run stuff on a color press separately. They're all different sizes. There's map fold out in the back in a pocket. Then you got to tip them in. Well, American public printers can't do that. And so we were looking overseas. I won't print in China. So we looked at India, we looked at South Korea, and they were trying to figure out if they could do the job, and we just couldn't get it done. And so we're thinking, oh man, all these maps and they're just beautiful, and nobody sees them. And so I talked to Chris, and so we're putting out a Chancellorsville Atlas that we're done with now, and it reproduces a lot of the hand drawings in the Chancellorsville papers from letters, and our troops were here. That really firsthand, but great stuff. But we're also publishing all the Bigelow maps. And so it's in this, atlas, 11 by 14, so it's a good size atlas, text on the left page, color image on the right page. So people are going to get all the Bigelow stuff plus everything else
Nice.
in one atlas. And so we're very excited about that.
Yeah,
And
that'll
that'll
be
be
fun.
out, should be out with the papers in June,
Okay.
latest in July. And so That's that. In the fall, we have something called the Carmen Papers, and not to be confused with Carmen's 3 volume Antietam manuscript that we published, which was literally a campaign study. But this is all like the Batchelder Papers. It's all of the correspondence that Carmen had, Confederate and Union, and it's about half and half. It's like 55% Union, 45% Confederate. So there's a massive amount of Confederate stuff, which you don't get in the Batchelder Papers, which is like 6%, right? And so this is the letters. They're basically mini battle reports, mini MINI, not battle reports. And you've got all this stuff with all these different Union and Confederate officers where they say, well, we were along this fence and we were 100 paces from this location and we fought these troops and this is where so and so died. And it's all this material that we're going to be publishing. I think it's 2 big volumes, big, like 900-page volumes. We thought about 3, but then it gets too expensive for people. We're trying to keep the price down as low as we can. And so Tom Clemens is editing and annotating those, and he has been forever. And I keep having him make changes. The footnotes are gold. And I know he's pulled whatever hair he's got left out of his head trying to deal with me. But Tom's been wonderful. Tom's done just outrageously good work. It's a lifetime study. And so we'll have that out this fall. They're laid out. Jeff Biggs helped us lay those out. He laid out the Chancellorsville stuff too. He's been a lifesaver for us. And so that's all done, and we're going through and proofing those now. And one more thing, the reason I'm doing both of these is the underlying fundamental reason is these 2 projects will allow future historians to write the next generation of books.
Yeah.
Because the Batchelder work and the other things have let people write a lot of Gettysburg material because you can't find it anywhere else.
Right.
Well, Antietam doesn't have as many tactical studies. It deserves them, but it doesn't because it's so hard to find the source material because it's so spread out. Well, all this Carmen stuff now is going to be available. And so you're going to have 2,000 pages of material at the minute granular level that will allow the next micro study of the southern part of the battlefield to be written, or the next Burnside Bridge book at the micro level to really be written with new source material. So it's that kind of stuff. And so we're excited about that.
Yeah, I'm super excited about the Chancellorsville stuff. I've seen a lot of it myself already, but just in the research I've done, but knowing that it'll all be in one spot,
Yeah,
easy to access. The Hamlin stuff is,
yeah,
just incredible and super underutilized. So
gold mine. It's a
yeah,
gold mine.
yep,
And what's funny, which is typical of Civil War research, you see people plowing the same furrow, and so they go to the same sources, but they get the same letter.
yeah.
And they quote the same sentence. Maybe they add one sentence. Then you go back and find the letter and it's 7 pages. And you go, what about the rest of it, which is even more valuable than what everybody's talking about? So yeah, it's going to be helpful, and I'm excited to get those out.
Oh, very good. Anything else we should be looking for the fall?
Oh, I know you were going to say that. Of course, my Rains book. Did I tell you I'm doing a Rains book?
Brandon Rainsburg. We'll get you back on to talk about that in detail. But
I
I'm
am.
super
Yeah, I'd love
excited
to.
about it.
Well, of course, the one thing that people ask me about the most in the fall is David Powell's 3rd volume on the Atlanta campaign.
Yeah.
It's all done. He's got the proofs now. And I talked to Dave yesterday. He's on the road in Georgia today. And he's got the proofs. He's going through them. And he'll have them back to Veronica on time so Veronica doesn't get mad, he said, which is good. And volume 3 covers post Kennesaw Mountain through the Battle of Peachtree Creek. And so it's Johnston's removal, Hood's elevation, Battle of Peachtree Creek. And it's really good. I mean, it's as good as you can imagine. It's as long as you can imagine, and it's as well researched as you can imagine. So volume 3 will be out this fall on time, part of his 5-volume set.
Yeah, super excited about that. Super. Well, we'll get you back on as more of these fall releases come out because just a great lineup of reading. But hopefully, if folks are looking for a good summer read, There's plenty of great stuff out there, but I personally, and again, not a paid endorsement, I've been really, really impressed with this spring lineup from Ted. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for all you do to keep all this alive and going because you do a great job, and I know how hard it is, and you know how hard it is. And people appreciate it. So thank you, Chris.
well, thank you too, my friend. So I'm Chris Mackowski on behalf of Ted Savas for the Emerging Civil War podcast. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.